Doing our nightly update here, guys. So my goal of this video will be not to say the word Let's see if I can accomplish that. Not saying the word Kind of a big task, but we'll give it a shot. So it is pouring down rain, and I am going to hide inside this restaurant for a minute and do my update. It was a good day. It was a good day, guys. I just said and I said I wasn't going to say at all. That's funny. Okay, so let's do a rundown of the day so I can get through my notes and put them aside. We started out the day with David Fry taking the stand, and I can fully admit that I was very concerned about David taking the stand. I have seen I've got to not say during this. That's my goal. So and not even us. So I have seen all of the videos that were presented on David Fry, as well as meeting with him many times myself. And I was really concerned, not just because I saw David's videos and him at the refuge, and not just because I met with him myself, but also because I've seen him in the pretrial release hearings that he's attempted. He has tried to get out on bail multiple times, pretrial release, and was denied. The interesting thing about David Fry is that is that he is somebody that the media has loved to, the media has loved to discredit. And so I've seen the areas that they have used against him, and I think it's been unfair. In all honesty, I think David is actually full of integrity and character. He is somebody I consider to be one of my heroes, not just because he made it to the very end, but because of the reasons he refused to leave. And the reasons he refused to leave the refuge were, one of the reasons was because because Sean Anderson would not leave, and he refused to leave him behind, and Sandy. And if you think about all the people who fled, and this isn't to say to shame them, maybe it is, David didn't really know these people, and he refused to leave because he didn't want to abandon Sean and Sandy and Jeff. And I think that that is something that is that doesn't happen nowadays, right? To have somebody actually sacrifice their own life for somebody that they don't even know. And even though he was given an opportunity to leave, and he refused to do so because he didn't want the live stream to be taken down. So David's one of my heroes, actually. I said it's gonna drive me crazy, but I have to break the habit of saying by calling myself out on saying So started out with David, and I was very concerned. I'd actually cautioned a few of the attorneys about him taking the stand because I was at his pretrial release hearings, and he became really upset with the judge one day, Judge Jones, because he said some really accusative, disrespectful things to David, and David in turn called him a bigot and got up and left the courtroom. And I was concerned that the prosecution would prod at him and make him react, and if they brought up things that are triggers for him, you got to understand that Lavoie was somebody he had a lot of respect for, and was murdered by the very people that are now holding him hostage. And so I was very concerned that he would be prodded, and he would potentially say something damning on the witness stand that wasn't true to who he is, but is true to the trauma he has endured. So all that to say, I highly cautioned some of the attorneys not to bring him to the stand, out of complete concern for him, because I have seen how these prosecutors behave, and I know that David Fry has been in jail now since February 11th and has not received any treatment for his post-traumatic stress syndrome that he has endured. He's received no counseling for what he witnessed at the refuge those final days, and I thought that it was too big of a risk. But he wanted to take the stand, and he did. He did great. He really, his true colors showed through. He gave a very accurate description of why he went to the refuge and who he is, and I think that in the end, it was a good thing that he took the stand. I'm not sure I would have taken the gamble as his attorney because so many great witnesses have already come to the stand, but I'm really proud of David for doing it. And I know that David feels like he was heard, because even if Maxine refuses to report on the truth with Oregon Live, she's the main reporter, and Conrad with OPB, even if they refuse to report the truth, David Fry was able to give his story and have it be on the record. And that meant a lot to David, and I have a lot of respect for him for being cautioned as much as he was and still wanting to take the witness stand. Even with the damning videos that had been made after Lavoie's murder, he still believed that it was important that he needed to take the stand. He did great. So I might break this video in half and just do it go through quickly the witnesses and then do an update on what we can expect from here on out, because there is still some more stuff to come. So David took the stand, and let's see, I guess I'll do a quick, and I'm not sure anything with me is quick, but I say that a lot. No, I'm gonna just go through David first. Okay, so David took the stand, and I'm on the wrong page. Okay, so they asked him if he swore to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, and he said, "I do, so help me Jehovah." And they asked him where he had worked, and I'm going to tell a little bit of his story because I think it's important that it gets out. So he, from up until 2008, he was working for, oh no, I just lost my spot. Okay, for auto industry, and when it collapsed in 2008, he went to work for his dad in the dental field, which helps me understand why it's been really important to him that he get his teeth cleaned and that he has good hygiene. You know, his dad is a dentist, okay? These aren't, anyway, he's a clean person, and he's brought up a lot about wanting to have his teeth cleaned, and he's been denied, and he said, "I've been here longer than 6 months, they still won't let me have my teeth cleaned, and that shouldn't be an extra, that's kind of a basic necessity." So he worked for his dad from 2008 until 2016, scheduling patients and helping repair things. He has no criminal record. He has never participated in a protest before. He's lived a very normal life. Let's see, he did not know anybody. So what's important to understand with this charge, the conspiracy charge, most of the people being tried right now didn't even know each other, and some of them never met. So like, he never met Ken Menbach, and he only met he only met Ammon Bundy long enough to shake his hand, and the rest of his interactions here and there were with Lavoie. He understood that there was a protest happening at an unoccupied building, and he wanted to go be a part of that. He, let's see, he had followed Lavoie on his YouTube channel and communicated with him in chats on the YouTube channel, and that was his only attachment to these people at the refuge. He had purchased his book before, and he had read that. He heard that it was an armed protest. He knew they were occupying an unoccupied building. He had a premonition that Lavoie Finicum would be killed at this protest, and that he wanted to go and meet Lavoie. He understood that it was about government abuse. He knew that it was peaceful. He said, "I have seen protests where they were burning cars and buildings. I knew I would not be a part of anything like that." He didn't really, he hasn't believed in war. Before this, he has not been an advocate of gun ownership. He has never heard of public lands in Ohio because there are no public lands in Ohio. It is a Western issue, he said. He came because he wanted to talk about the things that were important to him, one of which was Fukushima. In 2011, Japan had their nuclear meltdown, and it was melting through the core, and we chose to fill it with water. Or not we, but Japan. It is now leaking into the Pacific Ocean, and he actually quoted how much is leaking into the Pacific Ocean, and I didn't write that down. But it's a big concern to him. he came because he wanted to bring attention to these things, and he knew he would be able to get media attention and do that. He was disappointed when he learned that the media didn't want to talk to him about why he was really there. They just wanted to paint the picture of him as being unstable and crazy. He said he is not a fan of firearms. Let's see. Defend Your Base, which was his YouTube channel, had nothing to do with military. It had to do with gaming, so he was a video gamer. He spoke to his coworker Mindy, that he's known for 8 to 10 years. He communicated with her on January 7th when he was en route to the refuge. I want to say he drove like 2,200 miles, if I'm remembering right, to get to the refuge. He told her on the way there that he might be murdered because if our government will kill unarmed people, and this is a protest where some people are armed, then they will surely kill me. Or not me, I'm sorry, that they will surely kill people. He hoped that wouldn't be the case, but he brought up Eric Holder, and he said he knew Eric Holder had taken over a federal facility, and he was not charged in the end, and he absolutely believed that this being an empty facility, that there would be no actual charges, that this would last a few days, he would get to maybe be on the news and talk about things that are a concern of his, and then he would be on his way. He stopped and picked up supplies. He picked up 10 toothbrushes, bless his heart, and shampoo and conditioner and other cleaning supplies he wanted to bring to share. He arrived on January 8th in the dark. He was greeted by a man, by men asking who he was. After he explained he was just there to be a supporter and bring them supplies and see what they were doing, they moved the truck and let him through. The next day he met Lavoy Finicum, who asked if he would help him work on computers. He stayed at the firehouse. There were not a lot of people around because at the firehouse downstairs there were artifacts, and Lavoy and the others didn't want them being disturbed. So where David stayed, there weren't a lot of people staying. They weren't allowed to come and go. They didn't want to upset the artifacts that were covered in rat feces. Let's see. He noticed there was a lot of people working there. Let me see. Oh, I'm sorry. The defense asked if he knew that people worked at the refuge. He said yes, it was clear people worked there. There were desks with family pictures, but he said, my understanding is that they were on vacation, and that after their vacation was up, their managers had told them not to return to work. They could have returned to work, and he says they would have moved out of the way for them and let them do anything they needed to do. But the management had told them not to come back to work, and that was his understanding. They asked him if he attempted to hack into Ryan Curtis's computer. So this is I know, roads are flooding. I'm hiding inside for a minute doing this video. The police are coming. Let's see, they're flooding on the coast just a few hours from here. So they asked him if he hacked into the government computer, and he explained it beautifully, that he didn't actually even use the hard drive of the government computer. He plugged in his hard drive and he booted it up from his hard drive, and nothing on the government system was ever used or accessed, and that's all traceable. So the prosecution is saying that he hacked into their system, and that's not true. He used his hard drive and then basically used the government's computer screen and keyboard is essentially all, and he actually explained how a computer needs a hard drive to be a computer. So he didn't actually use the government's computer, he used his own computer, and in order to access his computer he had to use their screen and their keyboard. The entire time he was there, he never used any internet other than his Wi-Fi hotspot that he had on his phone. Let's see. They showed a picture of wildlife that he had seen, and he described it as an animal that had the body of a squirrel, I'm sorry, the face of a squirrel, but the body of a groundhog, and that he thought it was interesting, and he loves animals, so he went outside and videoed it. During the time, I said, during the time that he was there, they received hundreds of Qurans because John Ritzheimer they said John Ritzheimer was anti-Muslim. And while he was there, he started to read one of the Qurans, and they showed a video of him quoting the Quran that talks about those that are Christians and servants of the Lord will be saved and protected. And his point was that ISIS doesn't follow the Quran, and that to be anti-Muslim is to be basically anti-American. And this video showed him as a very peaceful individual, where he was saying he was very upset that a few of the protesters that came were very disgruntled towards Muslims as a whole, and he felt that that wasn't very American when people were fighting for freedoms and liberty for all. And so he wanted to quote some of the Quran, and he was very upset with some of the statements that had been made by some of the people who were very critical towards that race or that religion. And his statement was that we needed to stop the hate and the bigotry. He wasn't a fan of war or violence. He really wants there to be peace. They asked if he's Muslim, and he said no, he's Judeo-Christian. He's not a Muslim. They asked if he made the video with Lavoie in the basement with the rat feces, and he said yes, he was down there with the rat feces and the artifacts. That they actually brought a bunch of the artifacts in because they were outside under the snow, and they felt that was very disrespectful. And so they went ahead and brought him inside. They asked him if he got to talk about Fukushima, and he said he tried multiple times, but the media wasn't interested in truly covering the reason he was there. They were, he said, they weren't interested in talking about that. They were more interested, okay, listen to this, trolls. The human side of my trolls, I want you to listen. They were more interested in ridiculing me. So this was a human moment, right, where we can all relate on a human level. And so for the trolls that have been out there making like photoshopped pictures of me and other people, I hope that you understand that what you do has a very negative and evil impact on society as a whole. And when David was able to identify on the witness stand that his story couldn't get out because all they were interested in doing was ridiculing him, it spoke not just about the media, but about humanity in general, and those of us that would rather ridicule people than try to understand them. And so for the human side of my trolls out there, I want you to think about your own life and the things that people disagree with you on, and maybe for just a moment try to ask yourself, how would this make me feel if people were doing this to me? And even if it wouldn't really upset you or put you into some negative state, does it do anything to promote humanity? Does it do anything to promote unity or peace? And if the answer is no, then I would hope that you would stop and realize that you're being a part of the breakdown of this world, of this country, and you're doing nothing to actually benefit your own human race. You know, talk about eating your own alive. I hope you think about that. Maybe you will, maybe you won't. Anyway, they asked if he had a weapon before Lavoie Finicum was shot, and he said no. He never touched or held a weapon. Or, I'm sorry, they said, did you have a weapon? He said no, I never had a weapon before Lavoie was shot. I didn't go there to possess a weapon. They asked did you come here to prevent workers from doing their jobs? And he said absolutely not. Workers never came into the topic. I knew it was an empty facility and a protest was happening, and I wanted to be a part of that protest, and I was hoping that I could bring some issues to light. Let's see, it was a really big deal that they keep the place clean. While he was there, he chopped wood, washed dishes, worked on computers. He sent a message at one point to a family member and said he was at an armed protest. And then he wrote a note on January 23rd at the refuge, and it said that he was leaving. And they read this note, and it basically just said, I'm sorry this couldn't work out better, but my time here is basically done. and you could twist the note a few different ways. So I think the defense just wanted to bring the note out and ask what it was about and hear the story from David. You know, that really works best typically when you go to somebody directly and you just ask them, hey, what was that about? I was really confused about this. A lot of times you'll actually get the straight answer and you won't have to create lies or slander or gossip, but that's just my perception, I guess. So the purpose of that note was, he actually threw it in the garbage, but it was brought into evidence by the prosecution because it was obviously located in the garbage after the protest was over. And he said that was in regards to some people speaking a lot of hate, specifically towards Muslims, and he started to feel like if there was this much hate in a few of these people, that maybe he was in the wrong group of people. And he threw it away because he said it was only one or two people and he didn't want them to set the stage for everybody there, because he knew that wasn't how everybody felt. But he really didn't want to be a part of any hate. He didn't attend any meetings except for church meetings. He wasn't invited to anything with planning. He learned about the fence being cut, and which was later explained too, but at any rate, the fence being cut, the cameras being taken down, he learned about all that from the media. Lavoie invited David to the January 26th meeting, and he sent him a text message, and David was helping Lee Rice with some computer stuff, so he didn't get the text message, so Victoria took his place in the truck. Had he received the text message, he would have gone, and he believes that the bullet that went into Ryan Bundy would have gone into him. So I think that was really God's hand of provision on David, because I'm not sure that David could have endured watching Lavoie Finicum, who he had a great deal of respect for. I'm not sure he could have watched him be murdered. And I think that was God's hand on David for sure, and I think that the people who went, God will strengthen and empower to deal with what they witnessed, and I think he protected David. And by David staying at the refuge, he was able to get that live stream up and actually protect Sean and Sandy and Jeff. So that was kind of interesting to learn that he was invited. He had heard from Pete Santilli's live stream that two people had been shot that night. He had learned later, way later, after midnight, that it was Lavoie. Jeff Banta spotted 20 vehicles coming towards the refuge, and rumors said that they were all heading to ambush the refuge. So again, for our haters out there, if you could just for a minute for me, just for a minute, I don't know, get a glass of wine or something and try to relax for just a minute and think about what you would do in this position if one of your friends had been killed. You wanted to leave an environment, you packed your bags and you're ready to go, but you believed that either you would be killed on the way out or that the people left behind would be killed. And so you choose to stay despite your own struggles or mental issues that you might have. And you know, if you really listen to the truth of the story, I think you might have a lot of respect for David and think to yourself that perhaps if you were ever in need or in a major crisis, that he might be the person you want by your side, because he thought quickly under pressure. He got that live stream up and going, and he refused to walk out. He was even willing at the end, you know, we all say liberty or death. David was truly the only one who embraced that all the way, to the point where when he heard he would be raped in prison and abused, he contemplated death being a better option than losing his liberty. And while you guys mock him for becoming suicidal, he actually just upholds the very things that our founding fathers laid out when they said that their freedom was worth even their own lives, you know, to die with freedom versus living in bondage. And maybe you could see David in a different light and actually see that that crazy guy who stayed till the end and was suicidal was actually pretty heroic and pretty brave when many people were not able to live up to what he was able to live up to. Okay, moving on. At this point, they start talking about Lavoie's murder, and David's body language changed. He became a little bit hunched over, and he appeared to me depressed and sad They asked him if how he handled the death, and he said that he wasn't going crazy after he died, but he really wasn't completely sane. That what he had learned, he had been told by Victoria Sharp's video after that night, so it was the middle of the night on the 26th to 27th, he had been told that Lavoie was shot with his hands in the air and murdered, and he believed that at any moment he was also going to be murdered. And so he said he wasn't crazy, but he wasn't sane. He said he thought he was going to die, and he didn't care what people thought of him anymore. He also stated that he would like to believe that angels are what he hears and not a mental disease, when they were talking about him having a schizotypal disorder, which is a form of schizophrenia. Basically, under extreme pressure, he becomes much more paranoid, much more anxiety-filled. Let's see, he brought up the fact, and this is important, that he brought up this continued talk about these two Navy SEALs that showed up on January 25th, and they left on the 27th. They were destructive, they were rude, they were aggressive, they smoked in the buildings, they kicked in a door, and we believe them to be two of the names that will come out as informants. And that's important because some of the destruction that was shown was in the location where they were staying. And so if these 13 names that have been redacted in the court records, if they're released and they can prove that some of the damage that was left at the facility was actually done by federal agents, that's not going to look very good for the United States of America when they're the ones who are responsible for this. So these Navy SEALs were there half a day before Lavoie was killed. And before they came, the door was not kicked in or damaged, and after they came is when the door was kicked in. Let's see. Sean was reported, they reported that Sean would be arrested for the statements that he made after Lavoie was killed. And they said Sean was not leaving, correct? He said no, Sean was not going to leave, and if Sean didn't leave, I wasn't going to leave because I believed that he would have been killed had I left. Can you guys just think about that for a moment? I mean, this kid has had a pretty comfortable life. He has no criminal record, never been arrested. His dad is a dentist. He works in a dentist's office. You guys paint him, some of the trolls paint him to be crazy, but just think about what he was under at that moment. His hero had been killed. People that he barely knew were going to be left behind, and when he was offered a free pass to leave, he said, not if everybody doesn't leave together, because I don't believe they'll make it out alive. Shame on you if you can still mock and criticize him. I do pray that God has mercy on you for that. Let's see. Everybody there had a mistrust for the FBI. The FBI cut off their phone service, then dropped off a phone in a box for them that had no speaker and was a flip phone. So they couldn't all speak to the FBI, they could only do it one at a time, which allowed the FBI to try to isolate them. Remember how Ammon told us that they isolate, they demonize, they isolate, and then they come in and attack or destroy or kill. So they were trying to isolate them with his phone they had sent in. They also wanted to remove his internet connection, so they sent him in a flip phone. If you guys can just listen to this information and process the fact that this is your United States of America, this is your country, this is how it handles civil disobedience and protesters that occupy empty buildings. This is your country. Drones were flying overhead. David was receiving 3 phone calls a day, and he would speak for around 3 hours at a time to the federal agents. He was talking on the average of 9 hours a day to FBI, and he only took the calls because he believed if he didn't, they would send the drones in and kill him. And so he was trying to keep communications open. They continued telling him that they wanted a peaceful resolution. This is after they ambushed everybody on Highway 395, started shooting at Lavoie's vehicle at the first stop, shot at Lavoie before he even stepped out of the vehicle, and then shot him 3 times in the back after shooting him once in the front with a rubber bullet, which is what brought his hands down. This is the United States of America. So they had the drones flying overhead. He's on the phone at this point 9 hours a day. Even if they called in the middle of the night, he would take the call because he didn't want them to sneak up on him and kill him. Earlier, before Lavoie, sorry, phone call. Earlier, he did not believe that he would be arrested. He knew he went to an empty building to protest with a group of other people, and you got to understand the media was painting this in a completely different picture than what was actually going on, which is what we've heard from witness after witness after witness that showed up at the refuge. So when you show up at this environment, you don't think to yourself, we're going to get arrested. You think, I wonder if we should be here after dark. Maybe we're going to get a fine for trespassing in this empty building. But you definitely don't think you're going to get arrested or surrounded or killed. And their charges, this is important, you guys, because their charges are conspiring to impede federal officers through threats, force, and intimidation from carrying out their official duties. And what we're finding through all these testimonies is that most of these people never even communicated with each other, the actual defendants that are in jail. And the ones who did never talked about federal employees doing their job. There was no conspiracy. They came here to protest the government. Let's see. He wanted to read some of the text messages that he had received on his Defend Your Base YouTube page that would help the jury to understand why he was afraid and why he was willing to commit suicide in the end instead of being arrested. And the things that were being said to him were awful, and he has never been to jail. So again, you guys have to understand that had he been to jail, he might not have come across as crazy or paranoid, but since he had not been to jail and he didn't have a criminal record, he was very afraid. And he, at those moments, definitely believed, after Lavoie being killed, that he would rather die than go to jail for 11 years and be raped repeatedly. Okay, listen to this. So all these text messages are coming in onto his page, and he is told that he cannot read or show these text messages to the jury, that that's irrelevant. But something that stood out to me is that after the 26th, they all left the refuge and they went and stayed in a tent. Okay, again, 2 weeks in a tent where it's below, like 14 degrees below. I mean, can we just give Sean and Sandy and Jeff and David just a little, like, applaud? Because they could have left, and instead they went and camped in the snow to leave the buildings, hoping once they learned what their charges would be, hoping that the FBI would back off and let them leave if they vacated these buildings, now that they've learned these buildings are this huge deal and that they're keeping people from coming to work based on the charges that they're being told that are coming down on them. So there were people, and it was told that there were people in the bushes with night cameras, night vision, that were watching them. When you have schizotypal disorder, you're going to struggle with paranoia anyway, and now he's in basically a war scene, war zone, and there's men in the bushes that are watching him. And so he hung up with some string, some cans around the outside of his tent, so that if anybody came up to his tent in the middle of the night, he would hear them. He also put some logs around his tent, so that, hoping that somebody would maybe trip, and he would hear them. And then the FBI called him the next day after seeing him do this and told him that they were going to add new charges. Okay, so they're not trying to de-escalate this scene. They have people hiding in the bushes. They're bringing in all kinds of equipment to surround them. They know the stress that these people are under. And they call him and they say, we see that you hung up cans and put logs around your tent. We're now going to add charges of you fortifying the environment. At what point do we have a right when we feel like our life is in danger, regardless of who the enemy is? When you feel you're going to be sniped and killed in the middle of the night, at what point do we have the right to do something to protect ourselves, even to hang up pop cans without facing new charges, okay? Charge after charge after charge can be brought on us. And now we learn that for hanging up pop cans and putting logs around our tent, we're gonna get fortifying charges. So these things are important to remember, because if you remember David's state of mind on that final day when he was thinking, I might as well kill myself instead of going to jail, because they were going to get me on so many charges. After that is when he went and he drove the government vehicle, and he made the video where he was pretty upset, and he said, here's more charges you can add. I drove a company vehicle or government vehicle, whatever you want to say. That we didn't know when he made that video that the FBI had just told him he was going to get more charges for hanging up pop cans and putting logs around his tent. So understanding that, I kind of get now why he made that video. At some point you kind of feel like enough is enough, just do whatever you're going to do to me. He said on February 10th there were 8 Bearcats, which are very large tank-like trucks that surrounded the refuge. 8, you guys. So remember, we're watching it from a media perspective, but when you're actually at the refuge, things are very different that's going on, and you realize they are going to kill us. There was no warning. He knew he was about to die. He got the live stream up and going because they finally cut off the other phone, and he got the live stream up and going with Gavin. Then he had Michelle Fiore on the line and Franklin Graham. Everybody tuned in, and he started to believe that maybe help was on the way. But he wanted these people to come to the refuge to get them out. So they finally agreed to come to the refuge, and David said he became suicidal because of all these messages about him heading to jail for 10 to 20 years and being raped. And it was actually an FBI agent that talked him out. I think it was Mark, he said, not informant Mark McConnell, FBI agent who was doing the negotiating. And his attorney asked him, did you like Mark? And he said, yeah, outside of being an FBI agent, he seemed like a very authentic man, and I felt like I could respect him, and I felt like I could trust him. He was listening to me, and I felt like he heard my concern about what would happen to me in jail. And he told me, he promised me that when I went to jail for this, that I would not be assaulted and I would be segregated, as everybody is at night. They asked him why he wanted everybody to say hallelujah, and he said he just felt like there was such a presence of evil there that there was something about hearing them say hallelujah, and it wasn't because he was crazy. He kind of laughed about it, and he said, I just thought with all of the evil around me that before I walked into the presence of these people, hearing them say hallelujah might make them be a little bit less evil, and they might consider being a little bit more kind when they took me in. They did find, David Fry and Jeff did find a camera in the woods that had been watching them, which added definitely to some paranoia to realize that they were being watched. When they asked him why he didn't trust the FBI originally to come out, he kept baiting the FBI. You see, David Fry's a really highly intellectual individual, and he knows a lot. He's got a great memory. And he was trying to test the FBI to see if they were being honest all along when they were telling me he could come out. And he said, why can't you have the president pardon me? I didn't come here for what you guys are implying I came here for. And they said, in order for that to happen, you have to go through the court system. And he said Mark Rich was an individual who had fled to, I think, Switzerland. Yes. And President Clinton pardoned him on his last day in office. and he asked if that could possibly be done for him. And the FBI agent said it possibly could be, but you'd have to come into custody first and go through the court system. Well, David knew that was a lie because this individual, Mark Rich, was in Switzerland and did not come back to the United States to be pardoned. And so he felt like they were either ignorant of the information or they just were lying to him. And so he wasn't going to trust them. When the prosecution, so my biggest concern with David was prosecution. These guys are unethical and they definitely have the presence of evil around them, and I was concerned that they would incite or use things to trigger him. And he actually handled himself really wonderfully, and the prosecution didn't have much to go on. But they asked him why, when they promised a peaceful resolution, why would he object to that? And his answer was, because it's really weird for the bully to ask for a peaceful resolution. Gotta hand it to him. That makes a lot of sense. When you feel like you're being bullied by somebody and then the bully shows up after killing one of your friends and says, really, we just want a peaceful resolution. During that time, they would not acknowledge his grievances. So even though they were saying we want a peaceful resolution, they wouldn't talk to him about any of the reasons that he was there. And when you're protesting your government, if you don't do something that puts some pressure on your government to listen, especially when you have a government our size, you're not going to be heard. So here he felt he was in a position where his government should have been asking him, kind of like President Obama did with the Black Lives Matter movement when he brought them into the White House. And he said that he felt what happened at Ferguson brought great attention to the things that they had been suffering. Well, this would have been a situation you would have expected to be similar, that somebody would have allowed this to bring attention to the abuses that these people were suffering. And instead, all they continued saying is, we want a peaceful resolution. David Fry said they said that over and over, but never offered what the only peaceful resolution was him turning himself in and going to jail. That was their idea of a peaceful resolution. Well, when you're protesting your government for abuses, your idea of a peaceful resolution is probably not going to be you going to jail. It's going to be you guys sitting down and having an actual intellectual meeting about the abuses that the people are enduring under the federal government and the laws that are being continuously broken without any accountability. Hillary Clinton. So that's just a side thought I have. You're probably going to want to actually sit down and talk and feel like you're getting somewhere. They didn't offer any of that. They were trying to provoke a fight. Shauna came and said, did you know that it would be negative 14 degrees when you arrived? He said no. Let's see, Victoria took my place. Okay, I'm just about done, and then I'm going to probably cut this video off and just title it for David, and then I'll do one video for everybody else. Ken's attorney asked if he ever talked to David. I noted at this point he seemed calm now and relaxed, and was definitely not as uptight or uncomfortable as he was when he was talking about Lavoie's death. He said he never had a conversation with Ken. His only conversation with Ammon was long enough to meet him and shake his hand. Which again, these are conspiracy charges we're facing, so it's kind of important that these individuals never even spoke. So they asked if he felt at any point as though he was able to get through to the media and feel like he had been heard at this protest. And his answer was, the media is supposed to be the watchdog for the people, but they become the lapdog for the government. The media is supposed to be the watchdog for the people, but they have become the lapdog for the government. That was absolutely accurate. The media is supposed to report to us the truth of what's going on, and instead they hide the truth and they report to us what they want us to hear so that we stay asleep. And that makes them a lapdog instead of a watchdog, which is why we then have to become the watchdogs for them. Let's see. He said before January 26th it was peaceful. After 26th, women were freaking out. They were screaming. They were taking their children and leaving. Victoria's family wasn't sure if it was her that was killed. Everybody was upset. Cross-examination said, the car had to be moved out of the way for you to enter the refuge, correct? And he said, correct. And he said, you compared this to MLK, correct? And he said, correct. And he said, even with 18,000 rounds of live ammunition, you thought this was comparable to MLK? And then again, he stated, actually this was objected by Ryan, saying that David never said he understood or knew what kind of ammunition or weapons were at the facility. He said he was actually not into guns, and so to assume that he knew the ammunition, which it's not even a lot of ammunition for the amount of people that were there, as we've learned, but nonetheless, that was actually sustained, and he didn't have to answer that. They said, you're not a gun person, correct? And he said, correct. And then he says, so you own guns, but you did not bring them, is that correct? Well, David's never said he owned guns, but the prosecution's always trying to get you nervous to slip up, and he says, no, that's not correct. I don't own guns, nor did I bring any to the refuge. My dad does own guns, but I do not. He said after, and then the prosecution said, so after January 26th, once the leadership was arrested, how was the environment at the refuge? Again, trying to trick David. So each individual defendant is going to face their own charges. So everybody can end up innocent and one person can be guilty or how, you know, whatever. And I really believe they're trying to make sure that the Bundys stay guilty. So they wanted to point out that after all the leadership was gone, how was the environment at the refuge? And he answered, I wouldn't say that all the leadership was arrested on the 26th. I would say that those who were most organized were arrested on the 26th. Then he asked him, before the 26th you never held a gun, correct? And he said, correct. Well, apparently they have a picture or somebody testified that he had touched somebody's gun. And this is all the prosecution has to go off of here. You said you didn't hold any guns before the 26th, but here you touched and he named off this specific gun. And David says, oh, like it was a pistol and this guy showed me his gun and then I gave it back to him, but he said I didn't possess a gun. So then the prosecution says, okay, so you did in fact have a gun before the 26th, but you didn't possess a gun before the 26th? And at this point I'm thinking, is this seriously all you have to go on, is to try to pin him into the fact that he like physically held a gun for 2 seconds and turned it? Is it illegal to pick up somebody's gun and look at it and set it back down? No, of course not. After the 26th, he actually carried a gun for self-defense. Before the 26th, he had no guns. One last thing, I think I'm almost to the end. David pointed out that the guns were left because the people on the 26th were told when they came through the checkpoints that they couldn't bring their weapons with them. So you have 25, 30 people leaving the refuge, all leaving their guns behind, but they were not arrested. Most of them were not arrested. So follow me with this for a minute. So I think like 36 guns, if I'm right, I might be totally wrong because it's been a long 6 weeks, but I think like 36 guns were presented as evidence for the 7 defendants. But the 7 defendants had none of their own guns included in the 37 or 36 guns presented. So all these people were allowed to leave the refuge but not take their weapons with them, thus leaving them behind as evidence for the 7 who are now standing trial. Does that not sound a little bit like being framed? People are allowed to leave, but they have to leave their weapons behind, but then the people who get arrested are now charged with weapons charges. The weapons that the FBI wouldn't let the other people who actually own the guns take out of the refuge. Welcome to the United States of America, where their main job is to set you up and get you in jail, and it's not actually to protect your liberty or your rights or your freedom. Okay, last thing. Did you think you were going to be killed if they saw you with a gun? And David said at one point I was suicidal at the end and I walked right in front of where the FBI had come in, and I believed they would kill me, but they didn't. And this is right up at the very end. So he was being very honest. Let's see. Would you have gone? I already said that. that's it. Okay, that's it for David Fry. I think that was long, and I don't know how long this is because it's not showing me. So I think I'm going to end this video, and if you guys want to tune in, then I'll go ahead and do this next video, and I'll include Dwayne Schrock's testimony. And let's see, Dwayne Schrock, Tim Puckett, who was a rancher in Burns. Is that all we had today? Was David, Tim Puckett, and Dwayne? That might have been all we had. Okay. So should I just finish, you guys? I wonder if I should just finish. No, I'm going to sign off because my food is cold. I'm going to eat, and then I'm going to do a live stream, and I'll title it for Tim Puckett and Dwayne. So, and then I'll look through the questions too. Let's see. In this. So if there's any questions I can quickly answer. Yeah, this whole thing has just been millions of dollars is being spent on this, you guys, to prove that 7 people conspired to keep an employee from coming to work. And throughout all of it, their grievances still are not being looked at. Okay, I don't see any main questions, so I'm going to go ahead and eat, and then I'll do Dwayne Schrock and Tim Puckett in just a minute, and then in that video I'll also do the update on what's to come for the week, because there's some more stuff coming, and I need to make these shorter. So that's it. Love you guys.